Brazil is once again confronting the familiar challenge of how to sustain air power in the face of retiring fighter aircraft and delayed modernization programs. For decades, the Brazilian Air Force has relied on a combination of aging Northrop F-5M fighters and AMX A-1 ground attack jets, both of which have gradually approached the limits of their operational lifespans. Despite repeated upgrades, including avionics modernization, radar improvements, and compatibility with modern weaponry, these platforms cannot indefinitely meet the demands of a rapidly changing strategic environment. The country's primary long-term solution lies in its 2014 agreement with Sweden for 36 new Saab Gripen E/F fighters. However, delays in the program, driven largely by Brazil's own budgetary restrictions and political decisions, have raised the specter of a dangerous capability gap that could leave the nation exposed in the years ahead. The original F-X2 contract promised timely deliveries of advanced Gripen aircraft that would replace older fighters by the mid-2020s. At the time, the plan was ambitious but achievable. Brazil would not only acquire state-of-the-art combat aircraft but also secure a valuable industrial partnership, with Embraer responsible for significant assembly and production work. The arrangement was intended to modernize Brazil's defense industry while ensuring a credible deterrent in the skies. Yet fiscal realities have proven unforgiving. More than a decade after signing the deal, repeated amendments and funding delays have pushed the final delivery date to 2032, nearly 8 years beyond the original timeline. With only 10 aircraft currently in Brazil and many of the remaining deliveries years away, the FAB now faces the risk of being caught short as older platforms are withdrawn. The urgency of the situation has led Brazil to quietly explore interim options. According to recent reports, discussions are underway with Sweden over the possible acquisition of up to a dozen used Gripen C/D fighters. While less advanced than the newer Gripen E/F, the C/D variant remains a capable multi-role aircraft, serving in the air forces of Hungary, the Czech Republic, South Africa, and Thailand. It offers supersonic performance, a modern avionics suite, and compatibility with a broad spectrum of NATO standard munitions, from air-to-air missiles like the Meteor and AMRAAM to precision-guided bombs and anti-ship weapons. For Brazil, acquiring these fighters would provide a much-needed bridge, ensuring continued air defense and strike capabilities during the lengthy transition to a full Gripen E/F fleet. The idea of using second-hand fighters to fill temporary gaps is not new in Brazilian defense planning. In the mid-2000s, the FAB purchased a dozen Mirage 2000s from France to cover a similar shortfall. Those aircraft, though nearing the end of their service lives, were sufficient to preserve essential capabilities until a longer-term solution could be implemented. A similar logic is now driving the Gripen C/D proposal. By securing 12 fighters from Sweden, Brazil would be able to maintain operational readiness and deter potential threats while avoiding the pitfalls of introducing an entirely new aircraft type into its fleet. However, the path forward is complicated by Sweden's own defense priorities. Since joining NATO, Stockholm has faced new obligations, including the need to maintain credible force levels amid heightened tensions with Russia. Sweden has already rejected calls to transfer Gripen C/DS to Ukraine, citing the importance of keeping its own fleet intact for national defense. Handing over a dozen aircraft to Brazil would represent a significant reduction in Swedish combat strength, and such a move would require balancing export ambitions with alliance commitments. This explains the cautious public posture adopted by Swedish officials, who have emphasized defense cooperation with Brazil without directly confirming any deal. From Brazil's perspective, the stakes are high. The AMX fleet, developed in partnership with Italy, has dwindled to around 30 aircraft, many of which are no longer fully operational. These jets, based primarily in Rio Grande do Sul, are overdue for retirement. Meanwhile, the F-5M, though kept relevant through modernization programs between 2005 and 2020, is also nearing the end of its utility. Without a bridging acquisition, the FAB risks what it has termed an apagao, or blackout, in its defensive posture. This would not only undermine Brazil's ability to defend its vast airspace but also erode its capacity for regional power projection and deterrence. Alternatives to the Gripen C/D have been floated. India has proposed the HAL Tejas Mk-1A, an indigenous fighter with growing export ambitions. The United States has suggested second-hand F-16s, which are widely available and combat-proven. China has gone further, offering its Chengdu J-10CE fighters in exchange for strategic access to Brazil's Alcântara Launch Center, a key satellite launch site. Italy's Leonardo has even pitched the M-346 in a fighter attack configuration. Each of these options carries potential advantages in terms of cost or availability, yet all would impose new logistical and training burdens by introducing a second fighter family into Brazilian service. For a force already stretched by budgetary constraints, such complications could prove counterproductive. It is for this reason that the FAB has continued to emphasize the Gripen as the cornerstone of its modernization strategy. Despite delays, the E/F program represents a technological leap for Brazil, combining cutting-edge design with local industrial participation. Embraer's role in final assembly ensures that Brazilian engineers and technicians are deeply integrated into the project, creating long-term benefits beyond the immediate acquisition. A mixed fleet of Gripen E/FS and second-hand C/DS would preserve this strategic focus while offering the operational flexibility needed to manage the transition. Still, financial realities remain an obstacle. Expanding the fleet from the contracted 36 aircraft to as many as 50 would require an additional investment of billions of reais, an expense considered politically difficult in current conditions. A compromise involving a limited number of new Gripen E/FS combined with used C/DS may therefore be the only realistic option. Such an arrangement would mirror past practices, ensuring continuity without overextending the defense budget. The broader geopolitical context also weighs heavily on the decision. South America is not currently facing the kind of high-intensity threats seen in Europe or Asia, yet regional stability cannot be taken for granted. Brazil's size, resources, and international standing make it a natural leader in Latin America, and maintaining a credible air force is central to that role. A capability gap in its fighter fleet would not only weaken its defensive posture but also diminish its influence in regional security affairs. The coming months will be critical as negotiations with Sweden continue. Any agreement will require balancing Brazil's urgent needs with Sweden's own defense priorities. Success would provide Brasilia with a temporary lifeline, preserving air combat capabilities until the full Gripen E/F fleet is operational. Failure, on the other hand, would deepen the risk of a prolonged blackout in Brazil's air defenses, undermining decades of investment in modernization and leaving the country vulnerable at a time of global uncertainty. In the end, the decision may come down to political will. Brazil must weigh the costs of interim solutions against the risks of doing nothing, while Sweden must consider whether parting with valuable aircraft is compatible with its new NATO responsibilities. What is clear is that the FAB cannot afford further delays. Without an immediate bridging strategy, Brazil could enter the next decade facing a dangerous void in its ability to defend its skies, a prospect no nation with global ambitions can accept.